Can you imagine me being a fan of the Shadowhunter world, but having only read the Mortal Instruments and still being able to say I was a fan? Hello everyone, welcome to a video. Hot summer here in Seoul. You'll be seeing this occasionally throughout the video. Welcome, this is exciting. I had so much fun in last week's video talking to you guys about the uglies, which so many of us have just kept these strangely vivid memories of that book from our childhood. And just talking about that nostalgia for books was such a fun time. So I got the idea to just kind of go through the books that had a pretty huge cultural impact on me growing up. I'm not going to touch on all of them, but I think this is just a cute jumping off point to talk about books that shaped us, the asylum where they raised us, if you will. And as I was creating this list, I realized the books that stood out to me the most and that kind of stuck with me the most were ones that had a fandom around them. It wasn't until much later in life that I was ever interested in like music or even film or things like that that would be fandom-y, and we'll touch on that, don't worry. So for me, when I think of fandom and community surrounding media, it's always books. And to this day, I feel like it's so easy for me to bond with people if we share the experience of having read a book, especially a book series together. So yeah, I just want to go through them and relive kind of what brought me here. And before we dive in, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this video, which ties in perfectly, which is Fable. I'm sure you've heard of them before, but Fable is an all-in-one platform for readers where you can find community, you can find book recommendations, and you can organize your reading. You guys know that I love analytics. On the free app, you can import your reading history from Goodreads and your Kindle. You can create lists. You can track your reading and see your statistics. If you enjoy setting reading goals, it can also help you with keeping your reading streak going, things like that. They also have a community element where you can join clubs. You can create other public lists for people to find recommendations. You can make private or public buddy reading spaces for you and your friends. And the book club element actually is really cool because it helps you stay away from spoilers. People who are way far ahead of you talking about like, did you see who died in chapter 22 and you're on chapter 1? Fable will help you out. And then there's also just a For You page where you can get book recommendations based on your reading history. They have a new little AI agent called Scout that can also give you reading recommendations. It's just a really cool app for readers. The actual interface is really nice for those of us who have struggled with things like Goodreads. It's just a really fun time. And like I said, reading is such a private act, but the books that tend to stick with me are books that have a community around them. So if you are looking for that, highly recommend Fable. There will be a link in my description box to download the app, and then also you can follow me on there as well. So thank you so much to Fable once again. Information in the description box. Let's talk about fandoms. Okay, so the easiest way I decided to divide this up to talk about is through school. So just a breakdown, because I know that a lot of you guys are from different parts of the world. I went to school in America, and I went to elementary school, which is kindergarten through 5th grade, about 4 to 5 years old to 11 to 12, let's say. Middle school for me was 6th to 8th grade, which is about 12-ish to 13, 14. That doesn't make sense. How old am I? Oh my God, let me just put the stuff here. And then high school is usually like 14 to 18-ish, okay? That's what we're dealing with. I was born in 1991. I'm so excited that so many of you guys, I was worried when I talked about the uglies. I wasn't sure because I know a lot of you guys are younger, but we have a lot of like early 90s babies here. And so I'm excited to talk about it, but I'm also excited to hear if you are from different generations or different parts of the world. What were the things that you latched onto? Here we go, starting with elementary school. Category is orphan. So yes, hi, I was trying to figure out what were the themes of the books that I read in elementary school, and the overwhelming connection between all of the books were about orphans. Orphans, runaways, abandoned parents, and then horses. for me, at least. So I'm very lucky, and I was raised by parents who are also big readers. So from before I could read, I was being read to constantly. And so I don't know if this was, I'm assuming this was during elementary school. I don't think my mom would have read this to me before I went into school, but who knows? I feel like a lot of the 90s kids can relate to the Boxcar Children. Can I tell you what it is about? Absolutely not. All I know is that it was a group of siblings who ran away. I don't know what they were doing, but they found an abandoned boxcar, train car, lived in it, and the only thing I can remember is that they hunted/gathered for blueberries, and they ate a lot of bread and milk. And that is the entirety of what I can remember, but it is so seared into my mind. And I feel like a lot of us feel that way. So the Boxcar Children was really my first experience with the kind of absent parent runaway. I also grew up with a lot of literature that took place kind of in the World War II era, where children were taken out of London and sent to the countryside. So things like Chronicles of Narnia, for example, it was a lot of just children on their own doing stuff. But then when I was in about 3rd or 4th grade, we were introduced to orphan number 1, Harry Potter.
Harry Potter, Harry Potter, Harry Potter, Harry Potter, yeah.
So obviously now memories of this series are a little tainted, but it's impossible to talk about my childhood without talking about Harry Potter. It's hard to exaggerate how big of a cultural phenomenon it was. And Harry Potter was really the series that introduced me to the concept of fandom. You had like a different vocabulary that you could use with your friends that felt really magical. It was common for you to say like Akio something and have your friend bring you over that thing. You know, it was just, you had this shared language. And then of course the movies coming out and things like that. It was my first experience with midnight book releases. It was my first experience with people getting dressed up as characters to go to events or just for fun. Obviously things like Comic-Con and just dressing up as your favorite characters, cosplay, stuff like that has existed for decades and decades and decades beforehand. But for little old me, it was really my first experience with any of that. And it was so fun. It was so fun. Again, we wish it wasn't written by someone who just like nosedived off into the deep end, but it was just such an experience to grow up with those books. Going with all my friends to the midnight book events, the midnight movie premieres, it was just a time to be alive. But we weren't done with orphans in elementary school. I hope you guys know what I will be talking about next, the next book series, and that is a series of unfortunate events. So we follow 3 orphans who are forced to live with their evil uncle, Count Olaf. And it is just very, very dark. There is no happy ending. It is just a series of unfortunate events. Every time you think that something could get better, maybe they're going to be adopted by this nice neighbor family and taken away from evil Count Olaf. No, it's never going to happen. So these books were a really huge deal. I feel like they were slightly less fandom-esque. Like, people weren't dressing up as Violet Beauregard or whatever her name was. They were just, you were excited for the next one to come out. I just so distinctly remember reading, I think like the first 2 or 3, they just kept coming out. I remember, I was like, how much more? Haven't they died yet? You know, like, how much more can these kids go through? They were a kind of book that like, if I wanted to read, but I didn't have anything else around, I would pick those up. Slightly less fandom-y, but you could just, you knew everyone around you was reading them. They were a big hit at like the Scholastic Book Fair, that kind of thing. And yeah, I don't know why, we just really liked in elementary school reading about young kids going through big struggles. And it was just a choice. Definitely a choice. I will also say, tacked on to the kind of like kids going through horrible things, I think this is just a mark of childhood, honestly, is kids are kind of morbid. So I definitely remember loving the like Dear America or the Royal Diaries, but specifically like the Titanic one. And I would skip until I got to the chapters of the Titanic sinking, or Marie Antoinette, because I knew she didn't have a very nice ending, but it was interesting to read her childhood. We also had like Chicken Soup for the Blank Soul, and I remember really latching on to the Death and Dying one. Kids are morbid. Kids can read darker things than I think we give them credit for, if it's done well, if it's done responsibly. There was a comment on my video for the Uglies and the Uglies were more in like my middle school, high school era, and there is talk of self-harm in the Uglies, and someone commented saying like, oh, I just remember that book was really problematic, and that in 2024 an author probably wouldn't choose to write that. And that kind of blew my mind, because I think that kids should be able to read about dark things. Like, kids' brains, the stuff that goes on in our minds when we are growing up, especially going through puberty, can be really dark. And if your only experience with those things is like badly written weird stuff on the internet when you go to Google, that's not great. But if you have authors that are writing in this kind of safe fictional space where you are able to talk about dark topics, but again, in a responsible way, I think that that's really important. So I'm very pro like dark themes in young children's fiction, as long as it's done with good intentions and, again, just like in the right way. So open to discussion, but I really think that kids gravitate towards and are interested in dark things, and I turned out relatively okay. I think we all did, right? On the light side though, because we weren't just reading dark books, I will say in elementary school, I was very into, early in elementary school, The Magic Tree House. Amazing. We also had a big Captain Underpants phase. I remember I wasn't necessarily into it, but it was like a thing you had to read. So I read Captain Underpants. This was also where we had to read things like The Giver, Number the Stars. Again, we're able to read about these kind of darker topics, talking about suicide, talking about killing babies, talking about the Holocaust, things like that. Dark stuff, but we also had Captain Underpants to tip the scales, right? I don't know where I was for Percy Jackson. I don't know what I was doing, where I was, what was going on. I did not read Percy Jackson. I will also say, I'll put them on the screen, but there were also just like a bunch of peripheral series that weren't huge in my life, but I definitely picked them up in terms of Goosebumps, Animorphs. Someone told me the actual content of the Animorph series, and my mind was absolutely blown. Not huge parts of my life, but there they were. I also started reading, and we'll pick this up again once we get to middle school, but I was also obsessed with the series Cirque du Freak. It is about a kid who turns into a vampire. He has to fake his death and go live as a vampire in a traveling circus freak show. Obsessed with those books. That was just a preview of what was to come in middle school. In terms of literature and media in general, my middle school years were definitely the era of popular girls equals mean girls, the she wears short skirts, I wear t-shirts, truly the time to be not like the other girls. And a book series that I thought was really one that only I read, but seems to have impacted so many of us secretly, and now we hold the trauma of that book and are just kind of talking about it a lot more now as we enter our 30s or late 20s, and that is the Click series. This was truly the epitome of everything that was going on in the kind of early to mid 2000s in terms of media, where we have popular girls, but they're not just popular. They're skinny, they're obsessed with their looks, they are filthy rich. These books were really my first experience with other people caring about material things. I think that just for me growing up, that was never something that was a big deal. Was something that was celebrated. And then obviously the books that I was reading, it was about kids who didn't have a lot, kids that were just going on adventures. Like, the important thing was what they were doing, not what they were wearing or what they owned. And so the Click series was eye-opening, I suppose. And I feel like I would love to do an actual breakdown of these series and like reread them, because I'm sure I could read these in no time at all. The Click series follows a group of girls who live, I think it's in Westchester, New York. in these just absolute mansions. Like, they are the top 1%, okay? They go to this private school. They are the popular girls. I think there's 4 of them. And one of the girls has a family friend move in to her property. They're kind of maybe down on their luck or just moving into the area or something like that. Their dad works in like construction or something, so they're staying in her guest house to work on her family's property, something like that. Anyway, this girl basically is working class, normal girl, right? Who has then been dropped into this tiny little bubble of wealth. And we follow her as she tries to become part of this clique. I have a very distinct memory of when she, the like normie girl, tricks all the other girls into thinking that colored tights with shorts, denim shorts, is like the new hot trend. And she like tricks the entire school. It's very like I saw Regina wearing camo pants and flip-flops, so I bought camo pants and flip-flops. Very much that. I don't know why that particular scene is burned into my brain, but yeah, it was just many, 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 many books. They were also like Argyle or like plaid covers, which was like a choice. Yeah, there were so many of these books, and that was really the whole thing, is just this girl living in extreme wealth. Again, I felt like this one was kind of the opposite of a fandom experience where I thought it was just me. And it's only now, just now, that I'm realizing how many of us read it. Actually, quite funny, back in 2021, I was helping my parents move across country. And so I went back to my hometown and I was kind of saying goodbye to all of my haunts. And of course, I went to my public library. And in the young adult section of the Carlsbad Public Library, you can go check it out, they have a shelf that is just free. You don't need to check it out. You can return it if you want to, but like these books are not, there's no barcode. You can take them. And all the click books were on that shelf. I think our library was just like, you know what? If it's not in our catalog anymore, ooh. Yeah, I feel like those deserve a reread. Let me know your thoughts. I feel like we all, like, again, this like private shared trauma of the Click series. Another book about girlhood that was traumatic in different ways, but I feel like less just vapid, was, of course, Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. This was another one that we got a movie for. This one was definitely a more shared experience. I remember talking to my friends about it. This was also like, now it's just become part of vocabulary for my generation, is like, oh, Sisterhood of the Traveling X. We'll say like, oh my god, like if we're sharing something, we'll be like, aha, Sisterhood of the Traveling Coffee Cup or whatever. We basically follow a group of 4 girls who, throughout their summer where they're all doing different things, they have a shared pair of jeans, which even though they are all different body types, the jeans magically like fit them all perfectly and like look great. So they, throughout summer, they have joint custody of these pants, and so they will like pass it on and letters to the next person. And so we kind of follow through their letters. One girl is in Greece, one girl stays home and is a babysitter, one girl goes to visit her dad, then another girl goes to soccer camp, stuff like that. That was very like girlhood. I actually feel like I need to reread that. But yeah, that was another big, big, big shared experience for the American middle school girl, I feel like. But another series that I feel like, for me personally, the people around me, I only knew, I had friends that were twins, so I knew those 2 were the only people I knew who read these books. And I know that there's more of us because we got a movie out of it, thank God. This was kind of another like private experience for me in middle school. Angus thongs and full frontal snogging. This series, so funny, so good, so ridiculous. We follow a girl named Georgia who is just a girl in England, and she is so dramatic and over the top and just going through things that a girl goes through, but like so much crazier than I ever would. So honestly, what it did is it normalized my feelings. Like if I was suddenly like, yeah, I'm gonna become a good person, I'm gonna start meditating, Georgia would do it, but like crazier. So I was like, anything that I did, I was like, wait, I'm just being a girl. I'm not as crazy as Georgia. That's fine. I'm not meditating to dolphin sounds. I don't know, something about it was like, yeah, being a girl is hard and weird, and we are kind of Looney Tunes, and that's fine. And it was just funny and absurd, and we got an incredible movie out of it.
This year, life's biggest adventure is just beginning.
I like you, Georgia, even though you are mad.
This was another book that has forever shaped my vocabulary, talking about having a nervy bee instead of a nervous breakdown.
God, I'm having a nervy bee.
I'm just so glad that those books exist, honestly. And this is one that I wish had more of a cultural impact on the US. I feel like it was bigger potentially in the UK, let me know. But yeah, I sort of wish that I had more people to share it with as I was growing up. This was more my first experience of trying to influence other people to read a book so that I could talk about it. I remember kind of pushing it on my friends in middle school. Didn't work. Yeah, Angus thongs and full frontal snogging. Incroyable. And then in 8th grade, I was lucky enough to discover My Chemical Romance. And we all know what happened then. Yes, the end of my middle school years began the era of Twilight.
Screaming, hyperventilating, and downright scary.
My name is Liz and Rob, and then our baby is Liz Rob May.
I don't remember being Twilight obsessed person necessarily, but it definitely was just, woof, a time to be alive. I was already like of the aesthetic because I was very big into My Chemical Romance, so I already had, you know, adopted the black outfits. I was very much into the vampires, everything like that. So I was ready. I was like the target audience, I feel like, for Twilight. And you know what? It was fun to read. I have distinct memories of having the book open on my kitchen table with a bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios and then the box of Honey Nut Cheerios. And I would just like eat and read. So whenever I eat Honey Nut Cheerios now, not that I've had them for years and years and years, but if I were to eat them now, I know the flavor, I would be like, where's my Twilight book? This feels incomplete. It's not a complete meal. This was another book that inspired midnight release parties, not necessarily dressing up, but definitely like having conversations with your friends about it. Like, what team are you on? Things like that. It was so perfect because it was feeding off of the not like the other girls and kind of boy crazy books that we had been reading, but it also combined that sort of morbid fascination that we had from our childhood and just funneled us in. We were ready. It hit. Like I said, wasn't obsessed. There was a point in time where I remember I was annoyed by it, not by the books themselves, but by kind of the fandom around it, because I was of the My Chemical Romance vampire party, I suppose. You know, I was more of a My Chemical Romance vampire than a Twilight vampire. So I felt a little bit like, no, you don't get, I'm a different emo girl. Okay, I'm not Team Edward, I'm Team Gerard, right? That was the only time. I know that like Twilight then got hate because of like, we just don't like what teen girls like. I was never kind of part of that, but I definitely tried to distance myself momentarily from it, but I'm pretty sure I only did that mentally. Like, where was I gonna take a stance and be like, I'm anti Edward Cullen? I wasn't on that, like, it was all just in my head. And then we entered quickly into my high school years. Category is bad government. We are living in a dystopia, but we still have vampires, and now we love demons. Ah yes, I was lucky enough to go through high school at the height of the dystopian golden age. I can't stress this enough. Dystopian fiction rose because we were living in a actual dystopian reality. Obviously that is something that we have seen before. We see it a lot in film as well, in terms of Why do superhero movies become really huge at certain points? It's not just like, oh, it's a trend. It's often a reflection of the reality that we're living in. And so the rise of dystopia was really because of the rise of actual dystopian reality. So while I am glad to have been raised in the fictional dystopian golden age, man, the early 2000s. So anyway, obviously the biggest player in the dystopian sphere was the it girl, The Hunger Games. I remember enjoying these books a lot, and I was excited for another, it felt like, okay, this is another huge cultural shift. I was excited because I knew there were going to be movies. I was just excited to be in a new world again. I feel like dystopian fiction often lends itself to great world building because you have to learn about new governments and you have to learn about history and things like that. It typically lends itself to a rich world, very similar to fantasy does. And so I was very much on board. Like, I loved learning about the districts and things like that, and just the political climate necessarily more than I really cared about learning about Katniss or cared about Gale, right? So I really enjoyed the books, and I was just happy to have another great series to read, honestly. And this, of course, obviously led to books such as Divergent, which I didn't read. I don't know why, but I did not read Divergent. I did read The Maze Runner and very much enjoyed reading The Maze Runner. So we had all of that going on, and it was quite interesting because then in high school, we were also reading things like 1984, Brave New World. You couldn't really escape the dystopia. You went home and you turned on the news, you talked to your parents about politics. Our music, a lot of it was, you know, the kind of emo and post-pop punk era. It was a very angry time. We were very disillusioned. So even like the music you were listening to, and then the books you were reading, the movies that were coming out, it was just, we were kind of like, hey, the world is on fire. Like I've said many times in this video, a time to be alive. I will also say I keep getting comments. I like that these books are being revived, but I get a lot of people telling me that I should read The Kite Runner and A Thousand Splendid Suns. Those were by far, like those two books were by far like the most popular books when I was in high school for my entire friend group. We had, you know, my English teachers would be recommending them when they came out when I was in high school. I cannot stress, everyone read those books. So even though I don't talk, I've never mentioned them on this channel, best believe I read them. I have read them. They were huge when they came out when I was in school. So back in the old days. And then of course we just continued down the rabbit hole of paranormal romances. And this is where I have to make a confession, or not make a confession. I feel like you guys already know. I only read The Mortal Instruments. I saw the City of Bones movie in theaters with Olivia 7, 8 times. Paid money to go and see that film 7 or 8 times. Hilarious. I watch it once a year at least. Peak cinema. Why did we keep making movies after we made that? There's nothing else we could need. I only read The Mortal Instruments in terms of the Shadowhunter world, and then by the time her other books came out, I had kind of gotten out of that phase. I was in college, I was doing other things. It wasn't until I really started this book channel and realized that she had written so many more that I continued. Can you imagine me being a fan of the Shadowhunter world, but having only read The Mortal Instruments and still being able to say I was a fan? I couldn't be like, oh, don't worry, Infernal Devices was actually good, just forget about The Mortal Instruments. No, I only knew The Mortal Instruments, and I was still openly a fan of the Shadowhunter. To be a teen. And all the while, keep in mind, the Harry Potter books are still coming out, and I was still going to, or maybe all the books were out, but the movies were still coming out, and so we were still dressing up, going to the premieres. I feel very lucky to have been kind of growing up with the books that were coming out as I was growing up. It was a good time. So truly, that is a look. Oh, and then like just to go back to Cirque du Freak, I feel like that was really just the precursor for what was to come in terms of my obsession with vampires and all of that. If I actually filmed a video where I was going to be rereading the Cirque du Freak series, and I don't know why I stopped, but I filmed a little bit of it, and yeah, I remember it so well. I remember it so perfectly. I don't know what it is about that series. If anyone else has read it, let me know. But yeah, those are the books that made me who I am today. I didn't mention any kind of standalones. I feel like there were a lot of standalone books that were quite interesting, but in terms of the series, that's a taste. There were obviously more. I read like Meg Cabot or whatever, and I read a lot of like old books like Children of Greenough, any of the E. Nesbit, again, Chronicles of Narnia, things like that. I read Nancy Drew. Oh my god, I read a lot of older books as well. I also read a lot of Agatha Christie growing up, but these were ones that I feel like were just the contemporary ones that first come to mind, really influenced me. In terms of Percy Jackson, I feel like I was just probably rereading The Thief Lord, and that's why I missed out on it. So yeah, please let me know what you grew up with. What were your favorite fandoms? What was your first fandom? I'm so excited for this comment section. And of course, I mean, obviously the uglies. Like, there are so many books that I can't even, there's not enough time to talk about them all. Just, yeah, thank you to all the authors that helped shape me into the mess that I am today. I don't regret any of it. And once again, thank you so much to our sponsor of this video, which is Fable, a really wonderful platform for book lovers like you, like me. I will have all of that information linked down below where you can download the app, you can follow me, check your stats, join a book club, start a buddy read with somebody, make a list of all of your favorite childhood book series, etc. I am very excited to hear from you, so I'm going to let you go. Honestly, I am heading to Seattle in just a few weeks, a few days, and I'm actually going on a hike. This is such a tangent, but I'm going on a hike that I have to take the ferry to Port Angeles, and I didn't know that Port Angeles was a real place. I knew that Forks was a real place. I don't know why I didn't think that Port Angeles was. Anyway, I'm gonna try and, you know, be chill, but so excited. So I'm thinking of like maybe rereading Twilight, or at least watching the movies to just get in the mood for the Pacific Northwest. I'm very excited. Anyway, yes, we'll catch you later. Thank you as always. So excited to read your comments, and I will see you next week. Okay? Bye.